and they would commonly dig fire pits or build up clay above structures that would be used for a variety of purposes. Rather than using wood, which was not plentiful in the area, or charcoal as is common practice for us today, the fuel of the ovens were dried dung patties. One of the common household duties of a young girl was to prepare these dung patties. Fresh dung has a very high moisture content. It doesn't catch on fire. So their dung patties had to go through a process of preparation for them to be used as fuel for the furnace, which required the use of salt for the earthen furnace. What they would do is that they'd set the dung patties out, and they would pour large amounts of salt on them. And this was, like I said, a common household duty of young women. They would train them to be able to do this because it was integral to their society. You put a whole bunch of salt down on these patties, and then you set the salted patties on large blocks of salt. One of the properties of salt is that it has the ability to absorb moisture. If you've ever left a salt shaker out and left the lid off of it, you see it start to turn colors. You see it start to form clumps. That's because the salt is absorbing the moisture out the air. And so the salt would dry out these dung patties. Putting it on a block of the salt would make it dry out even more. Once properly prepared, the patties would start to smolder and were ready to be set on fire. So eventually these patties sitting on this under the heat and light would start to smolder and smoke. Like we look for our charcoal to start to turn red, and after it's been set on fire, we look for it to smolder, and we know that the charcoals are ready. Well, these things would start to steam, and they would know that they were ready. Some would even ignite under the energy of the sunlight. Now, think about what the metaphor we just read talked about. You're salt of the earth. You're light of the world. And one thing, to finish out the cultural explanation, the metaphor, before we move on, when it says if the salt's lost its savor, it's good for nothing to be trod under the feet of men. When these salt blocks had been saturated, when they had absorbed all the moisture that they could, Roman soldiers would use them and take them and place them in muddy pathways to make a stable walkway. One of the things about salt, it doesn't matter how old it is, it doesn't matter how long it's been set out, salt always tastes salty. If it doesn't taste salty, it's not salt. It's just a chemical, it's one of its physical properties of the chemical. If it's a salt, it's always going to be salty. Salt can't lose its salty taste, but it can be saturated and have its absorption capabilities reduced to the point that these blocks don't do what they're supposed to do. So you take the block, you've got a muddy area that you need to pass, you put it down, you walk on the blocks, and that's all it's good for at that point. So let's take a look at what he's talked about. Your salt and your light. In this passage in Matthew, Christ authorizes man to act both as salt and as light. We are authorized, mankind is to be an agent that facilitates flames of transformation and illumination. In other words, when we are in our environments, when we're around people, we are supposed to make it easier to ignite these folks. And when you set something on fire, when something catches on fire, it ceases to become what it is, and the fire begins to consume what used to be. It's a chemical transformation. The entire nature of it changes, and it's facilitated by this process of salting. And then, like we said, the light can be intense enough that it causes something to catch on fire all by itself. We used to sing the song in church, I wish somebody's soul would catch on fire. Well, if we were the salt, the way that we're authorized to be, somebody's soul would catch on fire. That we're supposed to be agents of change, and sometimes that's an adversarial process. It can be, their culture thrived on conflict. They lived by it. We have a much more laid back culture, but what Jesus is authorizing these people to do is to cause people to see God, to illuminate what's been obfuscated, to allow them to facilitate their transformation from one state or one understanding of God to that which God is revealing himself to be in Christ. Thus, as the devil tries to make dark or cloudy God's self-revelation to man, God authorizes people to proclaim, testify, or act as agents that counter this darkness and confusion. Tying back to what we talked about in the introduction, it's no wonder that the devil has vested such an interest in compromising the community that's tasked with projecting, protecting, and propagating the revelation of God. The whole